Welcome to the Danny Clinkscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Insightful and witty commentary, probing interviews, and detours from the beaten path.
Every once in a while, we have to bring out the big dog.
Yeah.
Oh, God help us. It's time for Danny Unleashed. Sponsored by Easton Roofing, where integrity matters. Go to eastonroofing.com for more.
Welcome back into the program here on Sports Radio 810 WHB. And it's Todd Lebo, as we've been talking about today. Petro's off, and what a treat. I get to be in the cage with the unleashed Danny Clinkscale.
You know, Todd, you're such an amiable fellow that it's probably going to be, especially, and we're face-to-face, so it's probably going to be a little more difficult to be as unleashed, today. But
let me push your buttons.
Okay.
Start right off. No.
You're not really a button pusher too often.
No, not on the
button
air.
pusher.
I push the buttons other times, other places. That's what we do.
Here's how popular this segment is. We were just discussing this before we began the segment. Watching a little politics last night, a little Twitter debate between me and someone of a different opinion. We signed off. He goes, by the way, look forward to Danny tomorrow. I don't know why I love him. He's a Jayhawk fan and a liberal, but I love him anyway. I love the segment. Go, Danny. I'm like, we all love Danny.
I've almost become apolitical in these horrible times because nobody listens and
right.
Nobody learns. So anyway, we hope that maybe there's a little bit more of that, no matter what side of the aisle you're on. But
the best way to have those discussions is face-to-face with people, and that's how you talk to people. You don't just tweet back and forth
with
to
6
people.
feet in between, of course.
Yeah, well, of
right,
course.
because I think
plexiglass
that,
like we have here.
I think that people, even if they're not like-minded, if they're in each other's presence, they're much more likely to be respectful of the other person's opinion, even if they disagree with it.
Yeah, it's just we've got a lot of. I don't know. Well, we can talk about this a little bit. Here's my problem with a lot of the things going on. The stick to sports crowd, whatever. The stick to acting crowd too. I mean, whatever. You tell someone to stick to whatever, and then they can't change. I don't particularly think that I need. I try to choose who I respect their opinions from talking to people and learning about them and doing all those things. I don't think you should just because someone's famous, care what they think about something. Because I don't think, for the most part, people who are famous and doing something know enough to be thoughtful about some of the very nuanced things that are happening in the world. So, in trying to have someone who's whatever famous athlete, actor, whatever, just tweet something out and get mad about it, who cares? I just don't care.
Right. I think that somebody does have a responsibility if they are going to take it on their shoulders and use their platform to be informed. And if they're not going to, you're going to learn that quickly, and you can just decide, well, that person just wants to, use their fame to be more famous by saying things that I think they think a segment of their fan base will agree with and like. Other people will be far more thoughtful, and you will be able to figure that out pretty readily and get involved with those particular people. The stick to sports crowd to me that's disturbing, because what you're doing is completely taking away the humanity of the people you're rooting for. These are not computer games, okay? If you just want that, play computer games and don't consider these are real human beings with real feelings. And if you love a league where 75% of the people are African American and they are going through situations that are troubling to them, they have a right to speak out. Now, you have a right to not like what they say, but if you just want them to go out and play, which is that's dehumanizing. They are people.
It's funny, like, if you think about it, most of these things where people get all mad, if you just flip it around, it doesn't make sense. So, like, let's say there's someone on Twitter who's an accountant who complains that that was a poor shot choice in an NBA game. How about stick to accounting? You know what I mean? I mean, it's the same thing going back. What are you supposed to ever talk about if not something else? Let's say the president of the United States right now, stick to real estate. Well, he wouldn't have been the president. The previous president before that, stick to being a lawyer. Well, he wouldn't have been the president. Stick to being a lawyer. Stick to owning a Major League Baseball team. Stick to being a peanut farmer. Stick to being a Hollywood actor. I mean, we're all these things. Someone born to be a politician? I don't know where it ends now. But I do think it's important to not just think someone's opinion means more because they're famous, because that's the part where people get all mad. And just because someone has a whole bunch of followers on Twitter because they can act or shoot a basketball or whatever doesn't mean they're smarter than the person it's sitting next to you in the room. So you shouldn't get too happy or too sad about what they say just because they're famous.
No, I think there is a real measure of truth in that. But what we will see in this community coming up in the next couple of weeks is truly how impactful a person can be. Because in this community, we have one of the, if not the most famous athletes in America.
The face of the National Football League.
And he has what I think is going to be a pretty easy decision to make as to whether they are going to kneel or have some kind of protest as a team. I think they almost assuredly will, but maybe I'll be wrong about that. But the thing that makes him impactful is that Patrick Mahomes is an incredibly likable person who just about everyone has a positive opinion about. And if he takes a stand that many people ordinarily would get angry about with another person, I think those people are not going to get angry at Patrick Mahomes. Does that mean they're going to change their mind about what they think of his potential actions? Probably not, but in that particular case, maybe they are a little bit more likely to ponder what is going on.
Well, because I do think this, and you guys tell me if you agree with me. I think in the last 4 years, many people's ideas about what protests were in the National Football League have changed because of what we've continued to see. I think
Clearly.
They have.
I mean, there was one guy, and he was vilified by, universally by people in positions of power, and now most people in positions of power are a lot of them are supporting it. There are still some who are against it, but the way the league has responded to these protests has come very different from how they responded in 2016.
Well, I think you were talking about this yesterday with Soren, is the fact also, though, when you're talking about, it wasn't just one, but say you're talking about, 25 people were kneeling, maybe something like that, and it's only 1 or 2 per team or 4. It's pretty easy to vilify those people in your own mind because you've got a allegedly whole team full of other guys who are quote, respectively
doing it right or whatever.
Maybe they're not doing anything, or they're really not doing anything.
Right.
They're just not actively doing something that you don't particularly like. In this particular case, if Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, and the whole team are kneeling during the anthem, per se, I think that Chiefs fans are going to be far less likely to be angry about that. And I don't know if you'll hear, but a smattering of boos.
Well, there's only 22% of the people there, so there's going to be less to begin with. But
right.
The people that will walk away from it are the people who are maybe the casual fans who are Chiefs fans because they're the hot bar, the fancy, the famous or the trendy restaurant, and they're kind of there for that reason. If they're the same people who would walk away from them if they were 5-11. People who are fans, I think, will have that kind of dilemma on how they want to react. I think some people will walk away, but those people were not with the team really. It was
I think
something
that
they rooted for because it was a community thing. Hey, our Chiefs. Because I've seen people whenever I see the NBA, like a tweet about the NBA players are doing this. NHL's doing this. There's 4 or 5. That's it. I'm done with the NBA. I'm done with the NHL. I'm done with Major League Baseball. You weren't there anyway. The same people who said that I haven't gone back to baseball since the strike. Well, you weren't a baseball fan. Those people, I think, might walk away, but the vast majority will not.
Well, I think that also there will be people who will say that they are not going to watch football, and then they will be at home watching football.
Yes. And by the way, when we see these things, sometimes it may not even actually be a real person on Twitter. Sometimes whoever the person's name isn't their real name. That's why I'm like, just don't get all fired up about someone on Twitter who says, I ain't doing this because of this, on either side of all of it. Because there's nothing real. Well, there's not nothing. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's on social media that's not real. It's just not real conversation. I know a lot of people are real people. They got blue check marks, whatever, blah, 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 blah. But a bunch of the garbage that happens out there isn't like, you don't even know if it's the real person who's saying it. They got fake names and all this stuff. So
that's why I'm never on there.
I think that's not right, Curtis. I don't know. But it's like, don't sweat this crap is my message to people. Mm-hmm. You'll be a lot happier if you don't get like freaked out about something that someone says out in the ether. I mean, it's one of those things. Now, the important stuff is, can you fix some of the problems that are happening in America? And that's what that's what the whole movement is about to start with. And I think, and here's where I think there's a problem, because I think we've heard a lot of good messages about doing things, getting people out to vote. They're talking about actually trying to make Arrowhead Stadium a polling place and making it easier for people to vote. All those things are very important, but we're so freaking impatient. You have to wait until the election, right? And when something happens, well, we got to do something right now. Man, the wheels of politics grind slowly. Now, things are kind of on fast forward right now, but you can't just change things in 1 second. And we're so used to now restarting the video game or deleting the app or whatever, and you got to just kind of do this stuff a little bit slowly. It's going to take a long time. There's been plenty of progress in America, plenty of progress in America. It's just not as quickly as you want it to happen. We have to have some patience right now, and I know that sucks, but you have to have patience if you want to have real change. This is not like, what are we having for dinner tonight in the family, okay, which can be a half an hour argument at my house when my kids were home. This is 300 and some million people trying to change policies and re-educate, people and change the criminal justice system. That's not going to happen in 2 seconds.
Well, I think a gigantic step was taken yesterday by the Baltimore Ravens, and when they put out their statement, and the second part of the statement had actual specific things that they wanted action on, specific legislation they delineated, and maybe that will create an example for some of the organizations, be it a players' association, be it a league as a whole, to have tangible things. Because I think it's been far too easy and somewhat accurate for people to say, well, you're screaming and yelling, but what do you really want? And now we are starting to see some things that actually want it. Like you said, the voting part, that's just a positive. That's just a positive action. I was listening to a soccer show yesterday, and a guy who's an announcer for the Salt Lake City team and one of the players, they have used this particular moment to create a meals program in Salt Lake City. Now, this is going to be a very contentious thing because the owner of that said soccer team is probably one of the idiots of the movement so far, in his comments that he made on his own radio station that he owns. But so a lot of people probably don't even know that. But the Utah team has been one of the leaders of the boycotting in MLS, and their owner's totally against it. So, and that's another dynamic we're going to see. That's a good dynamic we're going to see play out in the National Football League too, because Jerry Jones is still pretty adamant about the national anthem issue.
But just because some teams or groups of players don't have a specific bullet point agenda of what they want to get done does not, to me, discredit the idea behind their protests.
No, I'm not saying it discredits
I know, but there are people who do. There are people you will hear say, well, what's their end game with this? What exactly do they want? Well, that isn't upon them. It's upon us to make that change. I mean, if you see a house on fire and you call 911 and say, there's a house on fire, someone should come put this fire out, and the fire department doesn't come, you weren't wrong for calling 911. The players are trying to get people to see this house is on fire. It's up to everyone else to make that change. And they don't have to have an end game to make what they're doing valid.
Well, you have to have some ideas, and it's good to have some more ideas out there. Because here, like back in 2016, when Colin Kaepernick was specific about things, and it got messed up in the world we live in now with politics. But when Marcus Peters was asked about it, he didn't understand.
He had nothing.
Not a good. So
he was not a good spokesperson for it.
You needed to have someone who knew exactly what was going on. And I think there's been so much more education with players and the media and the public in the last 4 or 5 years of this, where I think it's much more clear now. And I think people can see through the BS of trying to, politicize a lot of these things. And I think we're on a better path as far as that goes. But you do have to, it's like Petro says all the time, if not them, then who? You have to have something. You can't just, you can't just say, we want to fix this. Well, how are we going to fix it? What are we going to do? You have to have some ways to do that. And I think we're seeing so much more of that now, which is a great thing because, listen, not everyone's going to agree on the solutions.
True.
They're just not. So, but you have to have real conversations about it. And it has to be, and I think athletes can be a major force in doing this, but that's where the Milwaukee Bucks made a phone call to officials in Wisconsin. That's what has to happen.
Right.
Well, I think also what we see is that these athletes are a testimony to, sure, they're gifted people, but for somebody to make it to the level where they reach, they have done incredibly hard work. They have been bootstrap people. That's what people always said. Well, why don't you pull yourself up? There's no more evidence of that than a professional athlete who has made it to the absolute highest level. There are precious few athletes who are so gifted that they can just la-di-da their way to the National Football League or, become a great player in the NBA. They have put in countless hours of hard work to get to a place where they are, obviously grandly
matters little whether your family was rich or anything.
Right, compensated, but also they have, so many of these players have lived these situations and nobody really heard about it that much. And now they're hearing about it. Think of the high percentage of the players in the NBA and NFL who come from very impoverished backgrounds and, have seen this type of things firsthand and realize that, well, in my lifetime, this hasn't gotten better. And now they have an opportunity to expose that. Now, some people just don't want to know. And that's, they want to go about their business, live their lives, and just turn a blind eye to it. And I guess that is their right. But it also is probably the obligation of these people who have this platform to say the house is on fire, to use your analogy. Mm-hmm. So I think that this all sucks right now because I feel bad for the Black Lives Matter movement and these players they would be they would have a much greater voice and have at least a slightly more willing audience if we weren't in the midst of a pandemic, too, because our whole world's been turned up in this year. And to ladle on this, for some people, it's just too much. I mean, they're like, I want nothingness. I want to be comfortably numb. From my favorite band, Pink Floyd.
I've got enough alterations in my life without having to deal with something else.
Having to deal with my ball games not being played.
Well, the tough part, these are very complicated things. And it seems simple. People like to boil it down to one little quick thing. Cops shouldn't shoot people. Okay, that's great. But, there's always something more to it. I mean, wherever you're from, Patrick Mahomes is in the National Football League, and he had a different upbringing than Chris Jones did, who is from a small town in Mississippi, who had a different upbringing than Frank Clark did, who had a different upbringing than Tyrann Mathieu has. We can't put anyone in a little bubble and say they're all the same. Okay, you just can't. We've all had different upbringings, and Curtis and I grew up like 8 miles apart. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we've all kind of had a little different upbringing here, and the problems that there are out there are not the same in every city or in every place, and the problems aren't all just because people think cops are bad. Okay, being a police officer is one of the hardest jobs, and it's harder today than probably it's ever been.
It's especially hard in the places that we really are focusing on the most, which is the inner city and impoverished places. Let's face facts. Crime is bred by poverty. Whether it's white areas, black areas, wherever. I mean,
desperation.
When people are poor, they are less likely to follow the rules if they have to, cut a corner in order to make their life be just a little bit more tolerable. And that's hard.
I think this job is as hard as it's ever been. Can you think of another job where there is literally a group of people who hate you?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
I mean, so that and your job is to go out there and listen, there are bad police officers. There are great police officers who do so many wonderful things. But your job is to go out there and try to stop bad things from happening in your community. Okay? That's a horrible position to get put into. And then you go out there, and now you're walking around on eggshells because if this thing escalates, I don't want to be the guy who does this, da-da-da, and then you put yourself in danger because even though you're out there with a gun, it's part of your job, you don't know whoever you come across with, black, white, rich, poor, whatever. You don't know what they have in their car, what their intent is. That job sucks, okay? And I think all too often over the past, 6 months, everyone's just piling on cops. That's bad. You shouldn't do that either. Just like you say, not every poor person, black person, white person, whatever, is a criminal, is a good person, bad. Not every cop is bad. And a lot of these situations, there have been bad decisions made by police officers and by people who were getting arrested or whatever. Been bad decisions made on all parts of these things.
I don't think that many people are saying all cops are bad.
I didn't say all, but or even the majority.
Even a majority.
I mean,
but in times of turbulence like this, people will react to the extreme.
Sure.
Defunding police completely, it makes no sense.
It's absurd.
You cannot.
Yes.
You have to have a civilized society. There has to be law enforcement. There has to be a military. To what extent does it have to be? To what restrictions should we put on it?
If we could trust everyone to be good, then maybe you wouldn't have to. But here's the deal. Human beings are bad. Right. There is a certain amount of human beings who will do the wrong thing.
Yes.
And they will.
Right, and there's certain and what
That's why we have locks on our doors in our houses.
There's a lot. The circumstances under which people live are far more likely to escalate the bad side of you. A good person can do bad things because of extreme circumstances, and there are just people who are inclined to do bad things. I'm not.
There are some people who are
solving that.
Sociopathic.
But what we have are, I think, most important to bring this to a sports discussion in the real near term is the fact that we have an incredibly appealing, almost, there's no way to say this in the right way. Patrick Mahomes is a mixed-race person. He is completely unintimidating. I mean, he is, one of my favorite people in the world is Ice Cube. I watched an interview with Dan Rather with him over the last couple days. He is a glowering personality,
when he can whip the look on you.
Right, and then when he, smiles or laughs or whatever, it's delightful because he's a really intimidating looking person with an intimidating. Patrick Mahomes is routinely parodied. He has a funny voice, but he's just not an intimidating person.
If he tried to be intimidating, you'd almost start laughing.
Right, he is a perfect person to be the face of something like this. The only thing he really doesn't have is the backstory of somebody who was raised in a difficult situation because he wasn't. The
most important thing is probably not having people who have that backstory. You need to have other people who don't have that backstory care. And that's what Patrick Mahomes can be. And that's what a lot of people can be, because that's the deal. Otherwise, it's just a small minority of people complaining about something. If you get the majority on the side of the minority, that's when real change happens.
I guess my Ice Cube element would be that if Ice Cube came out there as an angry man, then people are going to be like, whoa. Well, Patrick Mahomes can't do that.
And I do think,
like you say, he can't. It's just not in him.
I do think
he can be serious, and make important points. But he can't be somebody you're sitting there kind of afraid of.
I do think there is a sizable percentage of the fans in this country who do view LeBron James as that kind of guy. He's much more Ice Cube to some people than he is Patrick Mahomes. And sometimes I think his message, people don't get that because they just go, oh, whatever. I mean, there is some of that, I think, to him. I don't necessarily think a player has to have come from meager means for his message to. I mean,
if he's supporting it, that's fine. What I'm saying is if he had all those things and he had been raised under difficult circumstances, he might be the absolute perfect spokesperson. But I think he's going to likely do a great job because he's made no missteps all along the way. People are so excited about the football aspect of it, and I think it's going to be a fascinating. It's 2 weeks from last night. Allegedly, we're going to play football.
And you said it's an easy decision for him to make, but it is a monumental one.
Yes.
Because he is the face, other than LeBron James, he right now might be the face of professional football, and the Chiefs are the defending champions. He's a defending Super Bowl MVP. They're first up, and he is going to be the person who sets the tone for how players in this league publicly react to the situation. The entire weight is on the shoulders of one guy, I think.
And the audience that he is speaking to perceives him as a reasonable person who's nice.
Yes.
and that couldn't be a more positive position for him to be in to make, I think, a real difference.
All right, from some heavy topics to something much more light. Maybe when we come back, we'll talk about the Royals.
Now that's
or maybe we won't. I don't
At least
know.
there's some comedy there, right? At times.
Danny Klingscale is unleashed right here on the program.
More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
We're here with Joe Spiker, the CEO and president of Easton Roofing. And, Joe, you had a great year in 2019, a record year. 2020 comes, things are moving smoothly along, and then the coronavirus comes. But your company seemed to be very ready, very proactive, and very ready to serve your customers well.
Yeah, we adopted social distancing very early before the cities even put out the notices. And we started working from home. We are largely cloud-based as a company, so that transition was easy. Our technicians are wearing masks and gloves, and salespeople are not meeting with homeowners. We're doing everything digitally and doing everything we can to do our part to get over this as quickly as possible.
So for any needs that people have right now, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, you can always call us, 913-257-5426. But the best way is to go to eastonroofing.com, put your information in, and we'll give you a call.
Easton Roofing. Integrity matters.
Welcome back into the program. Todd Lebo in here for Soren Petro, who's off today, Monday, maybe Tuesday. We're not sure yet. Sometimes. I don't know. Danny Klingscale's here.
We're all day to day, aren't we?
We are all day.
You know, for people who I thought the first segment was a perfect combination of the world of sports we live in right now and some opinion, I think reasonable, not particularly unleashed. But I'll give you this. I should have done this a couple of weeks ago because the stat is a couple of weeks old. But just to bring it specifically to one of the most remarkable things I've heard of in sports recently was a couple of weeks ago, they trotted out a stat, and it was the first 120 at-bats or instances of this in baseball. The first 120 times this year that Mookie Betts swung at a pitch in the strike zone, he missed once.
Is that good?
He swung and missed one time out of 120. I mean, in this day and age where people whiff.
Do you have that number on Mondesi?
Yes, it's the other way around.
I don't think it's close. But think of the remarkable, we were talking about the hard work put in, and it's an incredible, but think of the level of eye-hand coordination and athletic acumen that it takes to do that in an era where there's 100-mile-an-hour fastballs and nasty sliders and one swing and miss. I mean, I almost couldn't believe it. And
that's beyond. That's Tony Gwynn and beyond.
I know.
Yeah, he's incredible.
Yeah,
I mean, he's really, really an incredible player. The kind of incredible player that the Royals haven't had. I don't know. So, do you see the thing today? Gerard Dyson has been traded to the White Sox. So he's been around. He's in Pittsburgh. Everyone loved Gerard Dyson when he was sure. Royal. He's
unless you're around Gerard.
Well, he's
yeah. I thought about saying that. But
he's made a nice living as a baseball player.
Absolutely.
He's like 35 or 6 years old. He's still in the league. So I looked up, Curtis, you can go ahead and pull him up if you want there. I looked him up. His career WAR, which I'm not a big stat head guy, okay? But I think it is a good judge of if a guy...
The overall ability
of a player. It's not that much different than Eric Hosmer's or Mike Moustakas' WAR. And
because he brings other aspects
things
of his game, right?
So either that says that WAR is a dumb stat, or it says that Eric Hosmer and Mike Moustakas are just kind of guys.
Right, just kind of guys who are making a whole lot of money.
Yeah, his is 14.9. Moustakas is 15.4, and Hosmer's is 17.2.
And they played about the same amount. I mean, those guys have actually played more games. He's played more years because he's got like one more year because he came up a little earlier. But as far as games played, it's certainly less than them because Hosmer was an everyday guy and Moose was an everyday guy. But it's like Gerard Dyson was a 50th round draft pick, which doesn't even exist anymore, right?
Right.
And he was a guy who has made something like $15, $16, $18 million. That's not even including the postseason distributions, which were always welcome for someone like that. I don't know. I don't like to poo-poo on Eric Hosmer or
half
Mike
that war
Moustakas.
was 13, 14, and 15 with the Royals, or 14, 15, and 16.
Well, most people's war turns out being just a few years or whatever. There are just a few that are there's like all the time the exact same thing. You know, that's just kind of how
Mike
it goes. Mike Trout is just epic all the time.
Right.
But yeah, it's just I was looking that up. It's like Gerard Dyson is pretty good. I mean, I haven't even thought about him since he's been gone because he was he was a Mariner and a Diamondback and a whatever. He's a Pirate, and now he's going to be a White Sox. So I don't know. Listen, good for Hosmer, good for Moose to finally get a payday where he's going to get multiple years, I guess. But
But Dyson's probably he's probably made upwards of $20 million. I bet.
Close,
16.7.
Yeah, I mean that's.
He's had to scrap and claw for every bit of it.
Right.
Is Hosmer like the
he's
fifth?
had to scrap and claw for 16.7 mil.
Is Hosmer like the seventh best Padre or something?
Probably yes.
That team is fun to watch, man.
Yeah,
they are fun to watch.
Well, it was. I did this on my Monday podcast, which is purely about sports, called Monday Musings, and the Royals this year have been just awful with the bases loaded. Just I don't know if they've had the bases loaded the last couple of games, but it was 2 for 21 at one point.
Yeah.
And the Padres hit 5 damn grand slams in a week.
Yeah.
5 in 6 games.
And the crazy part is that the Royals have had the bases loaded a lot. I mean, they've actually, as poor as their offense is, they've 21 times. Some of those
a lot of that's because
they base load with no one out.
They had a lot of
although
singles.
they do tend to load the bases with 2 outs.
Yeah.
Yes, they had a lot of singles.
Yeah.
And teams that hit a lot of doubles and triples and homers don't get the bases loaded that often because they don't have many singles.
It's also hard to get the bases loaded if you don't walk.
Yeah.
Yes, which they don't do.
And they don't do that very much. Usually if you get a base hit, a lot of times it's going to be worth 2 bases. One of the bases will be emptied.
A couple of nights ago, Mondesi was batting late in the game. It may have been Sunday or Monday. And he was running at third, 2 outs. And I said, watching the Royals bat with a runner at third and 2 outs is like watching Gilligan build a raft. I mean, you're watching it going, this ain't going to happen. There's just no way. And Mondesi he's the leading guy on that. I mean, he still has 2 RBI.
I think one of the things that pops into my mind when you use the Gilligan's Island reference is the fact that these iconic programs that we still see on TV Land and all those antenna TV and all those things and are part of the culture of people who are my age and a little bit younger, like Curtis is, sometimes they were on for like 3 years.
Yeah, they're just over and over.
And that's not a great. It's a great, pretty good run by today's standards.
It's not Gunsmoke.
No, right. It's not All in the Family or something like that. But they also made like 35 episodes.
Yeah.
So more than that. So I'll blow your mind here. So the new Peacock app, which is NBC's app, has all the Leave It to Beavers on it. Okay, I love Leave It to Beaver. When I was a kid, it was on all the time, and it's on channel 9.2 at 7 in the morning every day. So it's on there. So I'm clicking through there. 39 episodes a year. Forget this.
Right. It used to be just a summer vacation, right? Yeah.
That's just some child labor laws or something, man. 39 episodes. You'd be lucky. Now, some of the networks do 22 in a year, but most of the
dramas,
the cool shows or whatever, they could be like 13.
Right. Well, we watch this BBC series called Endeavour.
Of course you do.
Which is a prequel to the Inspector Morse ones that people are familiar with. That. So anyway, a season of this show is 3.
3. They're probably long.
3 of them. They're 2 hours. Yeah. I mean, they're like movies.
Yeah.
But 3. But the other part, and you're just going to have to go do this by yourself because this is a rather PG comment. But if you just want to sit there and be rudely sophomoric, watch Leave It to Beaver. Oh, there are so many things that are said in that show that you can take totally not the way that they were intended.
Well, when someone's called the Beaver, it's going to be that way. There are still some good lessons in that show. I'd still enjoy watching that show. But 39 a year. That thing was on for like 6 years or something.
Oh, yeah.
And so there was like
so that's 200 episodes.
The Newsroom was on for 3 years on HBO, 25 episodes total, 10, 9, and 6.
Yeah,
Right.
It's crazy, but how that goes. So let's pile on Mondesi some more here. No, we don't have to do that. But it is kind of it's going to be that way until he's either gone or he turns into something. And he may never turn into something. He's 25 years old now.
Right. It's more along the lines, and you can still say just 25, but it seems more it'll be more surprising if he becomes an impactful player than if he doesn't now. I think we've reached that point. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. We're over the hill.
You don't. I mean, just 25. Like Whit Merrifield was over 25 when he got to the bigs. Okay, but he had to do all that work down in the minor leagues. No one knew who he was.
There's very little precedent to Whit Merrifield's career arc based on his age.
It's him and Ben Zobrist.
Yeah,
that's like what it is, right?
5 guys ever.
Yes, right. But he still got the talent to do it. What it shows is that sports is hard.
Well, baseball is especially hard.
And the mental aspect of it is so important. He clearly has more physical skills even than Whit, who's a good athlete, for instance. But you think of so many different players. Mike Moustakas. I mean, how much better of an athlete is?
Here comes Danny to run down Mike Moustakas'
Adalberto Mondesi than Mike Moustakas.
Right.
And Mike Moustakas is a fine baseball player. And
almost as good as Gerard Dyson.
Just
And Mondesi
barely better.
And Mondesi right now. I mean, Mondesi is a handful of outs away from having his OPS be in the 400s. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like a pitcher can do that.
I keep going back to it because it's still amazing when you see it. 2. He has 2 RBI. I looked at this over the weekend. Over the weekend, there have been 152 3-run and grand slam home runs this year. That means 150 plus incidents where someone got more RBI on one swing than he had for half a season.
And he spent the early part of the season hitting seconds.
And I think at that point he had batted with 68 men on base and 35 or so in scoring position. 2.
That's not even including a bases clearing 3-run double.
Yeah.
You just looked up the home runs. It could be even more.
It's unreal. It's almost impossible to have 2 RBIs, 33 games into the season.
I've literally gotten to the point where the commentary about him is almost ridiculously piling on. I feel sorry for him.
Mike Matheny says that
but
one
it's
of the
funny.
things,
I mean, it is so ridiculous. It is funny. I mean, it is funny. But
no one's rooting in this room's rooting against him.
No.
I mean, when we
why aren't you supporting a team?
Yeah, right. But Mike Matheny a couple times has mentioned some great defensive plays he's made. That shows that his mind still he's not carrying his batting problems out into the field. That they still think he's upbeat. That's just a manager. That's just a manager.
He's made some bad players too.
Yes,
well, he's supposed to cover for him. And listen, he wants him to be good because that's good for Mike Matheny if they've got a superstar quality player.
Don't you think Mike Matheny has a way of saying kind of the things that were protective like Ned Yost without seeming like Ned Yost. It makes it more. He seems more. He seems like there's always he always puts in a little caveat that's a little bit negative, but we need results. I think he has
he's got a nicer demeanor than Ned.
He has a very good way of even trying to be. You're sitting there going, well, he's just trying to be positive, but it seems more real.
Well, this one, you'd ask Ned Yost the question, he'd go, no.
Oh, he always started with
no. And then
he'd
Mike
agree.
Matheny will talk for a minute and 15 seconds, and you get done, and you're like, I think he said no, but there's some stuff in there.
My favorite Neds were no, and then he would agree with you.
No,
yes.
Well, yeah. No, well, yeah. But no.
Well, I think this I think this is a phenomenon that's only of the last decade when people start their sentences by saying no.
Yeah, no, I hate that.
I don't. I drives me nuts.
I don't like it.
And I don't think anybody did that 12 years ago. Do you?
No, it's a new phenomenon. It's just, people just fall in. They hear it, and you just start going.
It's a Kickstarter. It's a starter word.
Well, it's a very very amiable way of
Patrick
starting
Mahomes
any response, because what it does is not disagree with you or agree with you. You're doing both at the same time, but you can't do that if you're going to actually make an equivocal statement afterwards, which many times you are doing that. But
what people say all the time, and I'm guilty of it too, is nice. It'll be interesting to see. We say that all the time. Maybe it won't be. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say this. You can. Here's a little. No, I'm not going to do it.
Do it.
Take a break. I'll tell you guys.
You're gonna do it right now, Danny.
No, I will not.
You will not.
I will not. I will not
before
be
we take a quick break, you selling everyone by the 31st for the Royals?
They won't. I don't think. I don't think this is the time probably to be, trying to unload Sal Perez or something, but they would be well suited to maybe make a painful choice or two, but I don't think they will. So I guess I won't sit here and bang my fist and say they should make some impactful deals, because I think the reality is we will just go ho-hum. I don't think there's anything that's going to happen before the trade deadline that it's going to have you say, whoo, bold move.
Yeah, probably not going to happen. That's Danny Clinkscale. He is unleashed here on the program.
More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
We're here with Joe Spiker, the CEO and president of Easton Roofing. What's the difference at this time of year as we head toward the warmer months for homeowners, and what should they be looking at, coronavirus or not?
If you didn't do a good job of home maintenance in the fall, cleaning your gutters out, when we get the spring rains, that can be a real problem. So you want to make sure that you've done a good job on your home maintenance, cleaning your gutters out. We can help with that. I always tell people they never get their roof inspected. They get their furnace inspected once a year, but they never get their roof inspected. And we do the inspection on your roof for free. So you call, you make an appointment, and we'll show up, do the inspection. It's free. You should have your roof looked at once a year. Take advantage of us. And most likely you're fine. And if there's a problem, hopefully we can get out in front of it and save you money in the end.
So for any needs that people have right now, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, you can always call us, 913-257-5426. But the best way is to go to eastonroofing.com, put your information in, and we'll give you a call.
Easton Roofing. Integrity matters.
What pitcher, former Yankee starter, World Series winner, gave up Bucky Dent's 3-run home run that won the 1978 divisional game for the New York Yankees? Pitched for the Yankees in a World Series.
Well, I do know this.
Won the deciding game, was the winning pitcher in the deciding game of a World Series.
Then he went to Boston.
For big money.
Gave up the bomb.
Well, Danny has to know this because you're from Boston.
Yeah, it's Mike Torres.
Mike Torres, born in the States.
By the way, I have this book. I haven't read it yet, but David Duchovny wrote a book, and it's called Bucky Blanking Dent, except they use the word in the title, and it's actually a book about him and his father's relationship with baseball. And as I said, if I ever fly on a plane again, it's probably one of the first books I'm going to read. But that's when I get to read my books. But very, and that phrase was uttered by many, and in fact, in a previous generation, Cardinals shortstop, an equally light-hitting player, Julian Javier, in the 1967 World Series, hit a home run over the Green Monster, and people used that phrase, Julian blanking Javier, back then. So 2 banjo-hitting shortstops.
You remember
hit famous
when
home runs.
it was so bad for Red Sox fans they never won anything? That's Danny's life growing up. And now it's like, what Red Sox fan doesn't know what it's like to be a world champion?
Luckily, I was
Remember
only a
who
Red
Bucky
Sox.
Dent ended his career with?
Royals.
Yeah.
I did a list one time. We used to do these Lebo lists.
He was a manager in their system for a long time.
There's a crazy number of famous baseball players, maybe not great players, but Bucky Dents of the world, who ended their career in just a couple of games with the Royals. People
Armin Killebrew,
like Terry Pendleton,
Orlando Cepeda,
and Bucky Dent. There was another one. I got to remember that list.
Pinson.
And it was
Gaylord Perry.
I'm not sure.
there's
Juan
a whole
Gonzalez
bunch.
play anywhere else afterwards?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Yeah,
it's
I remember that word. I do remember
done.
covering Juan Gonzalez there, and he got some pretty serious money for the day.
Santiago hit them both.
About 10 years later, I saw a Juan Gon jersey in the crowd. I'm like,
how'd you buy that?
That's a fan.
Because he only played for like a month for the Royals, didn't he? I think.
And then he was gone.
He was one. And he's somebody because of that circumstance. You don't think about what a terrifying power hitter he was for a few years, a short span of time, like
94 to
sort of an Albert Bell type of run where
45 and 120 every year.
Crazy. They just never could get to the World Series.
I think that
couldn't beat the Yankees.
Sort of an opposite.
Who could?
Bad timing to be good in the American League in the late 90s.
I think a little bit of an opposite current player who I don't know will be remembered for what he has been is Nelson Cruz.
Oh,
yes.
He's 40 years old, still
fantastic
before anyone
power hitter
sends
for a long
text
time.
In, Juan Gonzalez actually played one game the next year for Cleveland, so he didn't actually. He's not one of those guys who was on the list.
By the way, we're almost at the end of the hour here. The Nelson Cruz story, which the ESPYs was on, his backstory makes watching him succeed this late in his career pretty satisfying. It's an amazing path.
You think he ever thinks about circling around, not catching that ball in 2011? Though?
Oh, I said that I was rooting for the Cardinals in that series. I'm like, Rangers. I wish you would have caught that ball now. Watching, I was like, I wish you would have caught that ball and it would have won the World Series.
Yeah, that's a tough one to chew on your whole life.
One of my best friends from college, who's now passed away, was a huge Texas Rangers fan, and
he's the one
feeling really, really bad for him because he would pass on just a couple of years after that and never see his beloved Texas Rangers win. And I think that,
of course, he could still be alive now and not have seen his beloved Texas Rangers win.
That's a good point.
How long would you have to live to see the Texas Rangers win the World Series?
Yeah, he probably had double his lifetime that he lived, maybe. I don't know.
100, I don't know.
Because now
the Astros
now they're bad again.
From where they were.
Now they're bad again. So, but the Astros need to win another one, or nobody will recognize that they won. So,
rightly so.
I can't disagree with that, even as an Astros fan.
Cheaters, Danny.
DannyKlingscale.com. It's time to say that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, today's Kansas City Profile, presented by Easton Roofing, the sponsor of this fine segment, obviously, is Tony Severino, the former Rockhurst coach, and, of course, Easton Roofing, the wonderful sponsor. Make sure to contact them at eastonroofing.com, and they sponsor this particular segment as well as Danny Unleashed, as well as DannyKlingscale.com.
Very cool. That's our good friend Danny Klinkscale. He is Unleashed.
This podcast was made possible by our great sponsors like
Easton Roofing, the presenting sponsor of Kansas City Profiles at the Danny Klinkscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Easton Roofing, where integrity matters.
We hope you enjoyed the latest Danny Klinkscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Come back soon for something fresh and new.